السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. A question that has come in during the Introduction to Islamic Sciences program, where we covered uh, the poem known as al-Jazariyyah in the topic of tajweed, was with regards to how to understand the chapter of al-Maqtu' wal-Mawsuul. So, inshallah ta'ala, we're going to read a line from there just to get a glimpse at how the author has laid out this topic in his poem. By way of recap, al-Jazariyyah is an introductory poem in the topic of tajweed. And as we mentioned, the topic of tajweed can be split into two broad categories. The first category deals with tahseen al-huruf, beautifying and perfecting the letters, and that is by looking at and applying the proper articulation points as well as characteristics and the special rules that deal with letters at certain times. And the second part of the subject of tajweed deals with knowing the stopping places, ma'rifatil wuquf, i.e., where the person should stop, where they shouldn't stop, how they stop, and also how they start their recitation. And if we look at this poem, as we mentioned previously, we see that the chapters and the content has been split into these two broad categories. And we see a clear divide in the poem where the author, rahimahullah ta'ala, mentioned وَبَعْدَ تَجْوِيدِكَ لِلْحُرُوفِ لَا بُدَّ مِن مَعْرِفَةِ الْوُقُوفِ وَالِابْتِدَاءِ. And after you have you pronounce the letters properly, or you learn about the pronunciation and proper pronunciation and articulation of the letters, then it is a must for you to know about stopping and then starting. And then he begins to mention chapters dealing with things that are connected to either stopping one's recitation, where to stop, how to stop, or starting one's recitation. So in the start of this part of the chapter, al-Maqtu' wal-Mawsuul, the author speaks about something that is connected to stopping. So by brief introduction to that, let's look at one set of words. He's going to mention, you can say, compound words, or a couple of words that are sometimes written connected and sometimes they are written disconnected. So for example, one of them, he says an and la. So as you can see on the screen, when they are disconnected, they are written as an, la. And when they are connected, they are written together, Allah. When you are reading fluently, both of them are pronounced as Allah. But if your teacher was to, for example, stop you to test you, then you would need to know which of the two ways this would be written. Because if it was written disconnected, you could stop on an. And if it was written connected, you wouldn't be able to stop on an because there's no noon there. You'd have to stop on Allah. So this is to do with how the companions radiallahu anhum wrote down the mushaf. Okay, so he says فَقْطَعْ بِأَشْرِ كَلِمَاتٍ أَلَّا مَعْ مَلْجَأَ وَلَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا. Here's with a kasra, but the way I've learned it without that. So he's going to say here for us a number of words. So I'll highlight them here. So one of the compound terms is Allah, an, la. Another one is inma. Then the next one is wal-Maftuhu sil. And maftuh, so meaning inma, when it has fatha, so because an, ma, sil, he says sil, meaning always connected, is always amma, is not split like this. And then he says here, an, ma. So these are two. Sometimes they're written together, sometimes they're not. So this is what he's talking about here. So what does he do? He says, okay, فَقْطَعْ, then cut, disconnect, بِعَشْرِ كَلِمَاتٍ Allah. So disconnect an, la, make it disconnected, or it is written disconnectedly in the mushaf in 10 places. So what does that mean? That means most of the time it's written connected as Allah. But in 10 instances, it's written disconnected. And now he's going to give you those 10 instances in the following lines. Once he does that, and he finishes here, he says, in ma. And because he hasn't put another command, then we take the command from here, faqta', then cut, or know that they are disconnected, birra'd. So in ma is normally connected, except in Surah Al-Ra'd. Wal-Maftuh sil. And when this has a fatha, it becomes an ma, then sil, always connected. So it will always be amma without the noon there. And then he goes on to mention others. So let's look at these places. How are you going to know these places? These 10 places where an la is disconnected? You have to take it from the teacher. You have to take it from the sharh, the explanation. So in the next slide, we're going to see فَقْطَعْ بِعَشْرِ كَلِمَاتٍ أَلَّا. For example, in 10 places, so as we see here, in 10 places, مع ملجأ. So if we look, ملجأ comes in Surah At-Tawbah, in ayah 118. So if we look here, وَظَنُّوا أَنْ لَا مَلْجَأَ. Malja'a is the same word, malja'a here. So he says, cut it with malja'a. Malja'a here is referring to Surah Tawbah. And you see here, an and la is disconnected, is not connected. Then he goes on and mentions the second place, and cut it with la ilaha illa. And here he's referring to Surah Hud. He's referring to Surah Hud, ayah number 14. Where he says, وَأَنْ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا هُ. See that here? Referring, لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا فَقْطَعْ. So cut it, and la, with لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا. Which لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا? Where? In Surah Hud. So when you see here, وَأَنْ لَا, you see that it's cut, is not connected. So if your teacher was to stop you and says stop, you say وَأَنْ, because you know that it's disconnected here. Okay. The next place, وَتَعْبُدُ, and disconnect an la with ta'budu. And ta'budu, here he says yasina. Ta'budu in yasina. وَتَعْبُدُ yasina. In Surah Yasin, ayah number 60. يا بني آدم ألا تعبدوا الشيطان. An la ta'budu. Ta'budu is the key word here. And you can see that an and la are disconnected. The next place he says, so that's, I think, the 1, 2, 3. That's the third place. So the next place is going to mention Thani Hud, the second place in Hud. So here again, he's saying La ta'budu, La ta'budu. The same word ta'budu in Surah Hud, but not anywhere in Surah Hud, the second place. Okay, there is a first place in Surah Hud which is connected. Okay, but the second place in Surah Hud, which is in ayah 26 here, Allah ta'budu illallah. We can see here that it's disconnected. So that's why he said faqta' an la, cut an la, disconnected in the second place of Hud when they come ta'budu. The second ta'budu. The first ta'budu, I believe in the second ayah. The first ta'budu, let me just double check it, is in the second ayah, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, Allah ta'budu illallah. And that one is connected. There's no noon. Okay? So that's why he said Thani Huda, because this is the second place Allah ta'budu comes. Okay. The next one, he says, cut faqta Allah in the place La yushrikna. La yushrikna. And this place is in Surah Al-Mumtahina. In Surah Al-Mumtahina, which is Surah number 60, wherein we find Allah yushrikna. You see here, la yushrikna, and you can find here la yushrikna. And here you see the an and the la, an. Here you see that the an and the la are disconnected. The next place, tushrik. The next place, tushrik. In Surah Hajj. In Surah Hajj. Ayah number 26, I believe. Naam, it's in front of us here. The key word was what? Tushrik. And here we find tushrik. Allah tushrik. And we see that the an and the la are disconnected. The an and the la are disconnected. The next place is yadkhulan. And that is in Surah Noon. Surah Noon. As you can see here, Allah yadkhulannaha al-yawm. The an, la, they're written disconnected. So that's where the author says, faqta' an la wa yadkhulan. And where's that found? In Surah Noon, ayah number 24. An and la are disconnected. In the pronunciation, it's still the same. Allah yadkhulannahal. But if a teacher was to tell you stop, you could stop an. You'd show him that you know that this is disconnected by stopping there. And then you also know how this is written in the Mus'haf. Okay. The next place is where the author mentioned ta'alu ala. Ta'alu ala. And this is found in Surah Dukhan, in ayah number 19, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَأَلَّا تَعْلُوا عَلَى اللَّهِ. And we see that the an and the la are disconnected here. The next place is where the author says, أَلَّا يَقُولُوا أَلَّا يَقُولُوا عَلَى اللَّهِ إِلَّا الْحَقَّ. As you can find here, أَلَّا يَقُولُوا عَلَى اللَّهِ إِلَّا الْحَقَّ, in ayah 169. And that is found in Surah al-A'raf, which is Surah number 7. So we can see here that an and la are disconnected. The last place, also in Surah al-A'raf, is where it says La aqula. Here we find Ala alla aqula ala Allahi illa al-haqq. An, la. We see that it's disconnected. They are not connected. And aqula is the key word that we find here, that the author has referred us to. And that is in Surah al-A'raf as well, ayah 105. So here then is a brief summary of how we understand this part of the poem or this chapter. The author is going to tell us a command, faqta'. Okay, we know that now we're going to have to cut this compound word or these two words, Allah. And we understand that most of the time they're going to be connected, except in 10 places. In 10 places. And then he lists those 10 places. مع ملجأ ولا إله وتعبد ياسين تعبد ثاني هودا لا يشركن ممتحنة, and so forth. He makes the list. And then he moves on to the next set of words. Imma. And imma, we know to cut it. Why? Because that's the last command that he gave us. So it's normally connected except in Bir-Ra'd, in Surah Ra'd, in the special place that he mentions. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us success in this world and the next, and give us the tawfiq to be able to study these books. Bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. Jazakumullahu khairan for your beneficial questions. Barakallahu feekum.